Hello, this is Niswander, and you are watching the Nowman Show. Kelly Carlin has been practicing mindfulness and meditation for 20 years, leading groups for 15 years. She has a master's degree in Jungian psychology and is a certified professional coactive coach. We'll have to talk about that. She teaches or through the Coaches Training Institute, I see. So she's also an author of a book called A Carlin Home Companion, Growing Up with George. She's also a speaker, performer, and radio host on Sirus XM. Kelly, thank you for taking some time out of your really busy schedule. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Nice to be here.
And first of all, I want to talk about your work as a speaker, radio host, author. Then we get into kind of the spiritual, kind of psychological stuff, and then we can end it maybe talking about your dad and what's going on with you and where people can learn more about you. How does that sound?
That sounds great.
So first of all, as a speaker and performer, do you do stand-up comedy?
I do not. I never had a hunger for it. It wasn't something that ever really entered my consciousness. I mean, I wanted to be on camera and I wanted to be an actor at one point, and I still like to do that kind of stuff. But in my mid-30s, I realized that I did want to be on a stage speaking to the audience. And that was when solo shows started becoming a thing. It was like the late 90s. And I'd seen a lot of solo shows in LA, and I knew that I wanted to go on stage and tell my story and tell stories and really just bring my human story, even though it was kind of extraordinary in some ways, my ordinary human story to the world, because I got so much myself from being an audience member and watching other people share their amazing journeys and learning from them and seeing that I'm not alone and I'm not crazy and all that kind of stuff. So I really wanted to be a part of that. And so I started writing my first solo show in like 99. It was a couple years after my mom died. And I did some readings of it, and then was going to do a big run of it here in LA. And my dad just felt really uncomfortable with it. And so I put it on the shelf and ended up going to grad school, ended up going to Pacifica Graduate Institute. But the last, in the last 10 years, for about 7 of those years, I did tour a solo show called A Carlin Home Companion. It was the first expression of A Carlin Home Companion. It was directed by Paul Provenza, and toured it around the country a little bit, some comedy festivals, things like that, and then had a really amazing 5-week run here in Los Angeles at a place called the Falcon Theater, which was Gary Marshall's theater and is now called the Gary Marshall Theater. And that was the culmination for me for the solo show. It was incredible. I got to do it for 5 weeks. I got to rehearse. I got to have a real set and a real lighting design. It was like, it was done like at an Broadway level. It was incredible, just the production part of it. So, and that right at this point, that has satisfied a lot of my performance needs and stuff. I'm starting to get a little bit of a hankering again, but it's been 2 years since I've toured. So I'm okay being done with it. I'm definitely done with A Carlin Home Companion. So we'll see what happens in the future. I love theater though. I love being on a stage. I love being with a live audience. There's nothing like it.
Yes.
And I'm really just so thankful that I got a chance with my solo show, and especially with my run at the Falcon, to learn to really be on the stage and be alive and feel the energy and not be just out of my body and terrified the whole time. So it's been a huge learning experience for me. And having, I don't think I really realized until my dad died what a huge shadow he was around my performing. And that really came more clear to me as I wrote my story and told my story and things like that. And that's part of it. The last 10 years of what I've lived is something that I do want to talk more about in the future and tell a story about. But I want to find a way to do it that it's not focused on my dad so much, even though he'll be a part of it. Because it's tricky for me right now.
Yeah, because you have your own identity as well, and then you also have to be realistic about the fact that so many millions of people all over the world just love your father. I mean, uh, the hippy dippy weatherman, the HBO specials, all of that stuff is ingrained in a lot of our minds. That
Yeah.
it's part of our growing up. Become for me, it was a part of my the comedy side of me growing up. Even though I'm a musician. Humongous inspiration. How long did it take you to write that book?
I've been telling stories since I did my first solo show in 99, put it on the shelf right away, had a backbone of it. Then after grad school, 2004, 2005, I got back on stage and I started telling stories around LA, around all the LA storytelling venues, Sit and Spin and the Rose and all these different places. And so I was kind of built, I was slowly writing more and more stuff. Then my dad died, 2008.
Mm-hmm.
And, it basically what happened was I became friends with Lewis Black, and he invited my husband and I on a cruise that was going to be like a bunch of he and his comedian friends. They'd four-walled like a lounge on the cruise ship. So there were like 400, 500 rabid Lewis Black fans. And we were friends with him. And he said, look, I want you guys to come on the cruise, and to pay your way, Kelly, you just have to go on and tell some of your family stories on one of the day things. We need a day event. I'm like, okay. And I got up there and I threw up some videos and told some family stories that I'd already written. And then I took my dad's memoir, his posthumous memoir, Last Words, and, took some of those stories. And I walked off the stage and there wasn't a dry eye in the house. People had laughed and cried, and everyone said to me, you've got a story to tell. So I started working with Paul Provenza in 2011 and started writing this show and started doing it in comedy festivals. And then I was in New York in 2013, did a solo show festival there, performed it 3 or 4 times, had just gotten a book agent, had a book proposal that we had shopped around a little bit, and that's another story. And my agent, it didn't tell me, but St. Martin's Press really wanted my book. And so the editor showed up at my show. I didn't know any of this. And 5 days later, I had a book deal with St. Martin's Press. And so that was November of 2013. And I had till basically September, October of 2014 to write the thing, because it was going to come out in 2015. So I wrote it in 9 months, even though I had the because I had the scaffolding, I had a great outline, and I had probably about, a third of it, a third to a half written in some form. Probably more like a third. So that helped. I had a big head start with that, but it was 9 months. It was 9 months. It was a pregnancy. And I had a great editor. She's amazing. And that really helped. And I had a great outline, and I really worked the narrative for about 3 or 4 years already with Paul Provenza. So that helped a lot. I mean, we can all tell probably 10 different versions of our family, but I wanted this one to be about, me finding my voice, my family running into their drug and alcohol issues and the impact of that, but really how love in the end, kept us together and kept us alive and kept us sane and all of that. So it was It was everyday writing. It was a lot of writing.
I understand. I do a lot of writing too, and started as a musician. So, but writing to me has expanded. You went to school and you got a degree. Why a degree in Jungian psychology?
Well, I knew that I wanted to after I kind of walked away from this solo show and I was like, all right, I know that I want to understand enough about the human journey because I want to talk about my own journey in big ways, but I want to help other people talk about it. And I just wanted to understand, how the hell do we end up like this? and I'm one of the lucky ones. I had gone through a lot. I mean, that's why I was motivated to do my solo show. It's why I ultimately wanted to do my show again and write my book, is because I'd gone through a lot and I'd come out the other end. And so I was also really curious about, how do we heal ourselves? How do we restore a sense of wholeness to ourselves, or even have a relationship with wholeness? And I've always been a seeker. Everyone in my family was a seeker, even though my dad was an atheist, and the atheists loved to claim my dad. My dad was definitely an agnostic and totally a seeker. And I knew I just didn't want to get I didn't know. I wanted to do something that was creative, but also really deep and soulful and spiritual, but also had a little bit of practicality to it, strangely enough. And so I found this place. I'd already known about it, but this place, Pacifica Graduate Institute, it's up in Montecito, Carpinteria, Santa Barbara area. And they have a slew of things. They teach mythology and Jungian depth psychology and all of this. And I went for the master's program, the master's program, because you could get an MFT if you needed to and become a therapist and all that kind of stuff. So that was the practical side. But it had a lot of stuff in it where you could do art pieces and art projects for certain classes. And even your thesis could be part art and part academic. And so I knew for me that it would be a creative outlet. I didn't know a ton about Carl Jung at the time, but I knew that he was someone who, had introduced the idea of archetypes and had this relationship with what it means to be a modern person, but a spiritual person, so that you can be rational and at the same time have a relationship with the numinous. And I think that really spoke to me, because I feel like I am both of those things very much so. I'm certainly a modern, rational, science-loving woman, and yet I've had some profound experiences that I can't really explain in relation to the numinous and to whatever that thing is, that imaginal realm is what they call it these days.
Consciousness.
Huh?
I like to call it consciousness.
Yeah, it is consciousness, but it is a worldview too. It's circling back around before we became, these purely rational thinkers, which was really important in the Enlightenment for us to separate away from this, this kind of mythical way of looking at the world, and using our rational minds and critical thinking and all of that. But what we lost in all of that is a relationship with our depths and our soul and the imagination even, and subjectivity and the importance of subjectivity. It all became a subjective world where everything's a dead, meaningless space. And I'm not interested in that. So Pacifica really gave me that. And it also gave me this great plan B. I got to be a therapist if I wanted to. And I graduated from there and was training to be a therapist for a few years, but I knew it was kind of just a temporary thing. I really wasn't interested in being certified by the state and earning all those hours and being a therapist and sitting in a room for the next 25 years of my life, worrying that people who were going to be depressed would kill themselves if I went on vacation. Like, it had no interest in that.
Yes, I hear you. I understand.
I mean, because it's important work, and thank God for therapists, because I needed them a lot in my life. But I've been a therapist since I was 4 years old with my parents, and I was kind of like, I'm done with it. So, but I wanted to take all of that. So that's why I got certified as a life coach. I went to CTI, took their classes, decided I could work with high functioning people and do the depth work as much as I wanted, as long as I knew I was working with people who were stable. Um, and so I started doing that. I mean, that was really what I started. And then, like I said, in 2008, I had a great coaching practice for a few years, but was still trying to figure out what to do with it and who I was, and wasn't really owning my creative side too much. And then my dad died in 2008, and I coached for a little while and then walked away from it and really decided to go all in with the solo show and then writing the book, like really kind of immerse myself in the entertainment world. And because I'm an only child, I'm in charge of my dad's legacy. So that my whole life changed when my dad died. Whole life changed.
Yeah.
And so really, since I stopped touring the show in 2016, and the book came out in 2015, the paperback in 2016, I knew that I was done being George Carlin's daughter in that way. I'd done it for 8 years, and honored by it and thankful for it. And I'm still obviously my father's daughter. And I work in certain areas. I work with the National Comedy Center, where I donated his archives. I do that. I have my Sirius XM show. I do that. But I knew it was time for me to figure out how to integrate all these parts of me, and pick up the teacher, the curious spiritual person, how to integrate that back into my work in such a way that didn't make me feel like I was ignoring my creative life too.
Now, your father, I actually watched, when I was doing other things, I watched the last interview he did, which he really opened up a lot about. And just like when he would say things that remind me of what's going on in the world right now. I mean, it's just like 2007, and this is still, it sounds like he's talking yesterday.
I know.
So, and he talks about the planet is fine, the people are effed. The planet will be here, will go away, the planet will heal. Nobody wants to rock the boat, though. Nobody wants to change anything. We're on a nice downward glide. We squandered a great gift, and all those things are like, oh my gosh, it's true. And Kurt Vonnegut said similar things like, the Earth is doing just fine, but we're getting rid of ourselves pretty well, something like that. And I thought, what do you think your father would have to say about what's going on right now? I mean, with what I would call a very unenlightened era of our history here in this country, and particularly in even the world at this time, particularly the United States, seems to be extraordinarily unenlightened as far as the political world is concerned. But I find conversations like this and music and cultural things, I'm working cultural and economic transition, because that's where I see the hope. And having conversations like this with people on all levels, celebrities, regular people, homeless people on the street, I don't care. Everyone has a soul. That's what I see the hope is. How do you think your father would look at all this that's going on right now?
Well, he made a decision, a personal and creative decision, to become the person who disengaged from the species. He decided to walk away from it all. When he did The Planet is Fine, that was in 1992 on his Jammin' in New York show. And it was very controversial because, he wasn't saying don't try to save the planet, but he was saying the only reason you're trying to save the planet is because you're trying to save your life, your convenient life. Like, let's just get real about it.
Ego. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, you're trying to save it so that you're not inconvenienced anymore. And if you really want to save the planet, then we would stop driving cars.
Yes.
And we would stop eating beef. I mean, like those two things would probably save the planet right now. We would probably be okay if we could do those two things.
That's right.
But we're really not interested in that. So, and now with all of our devices, it's just so anyway. So, he warned us about all of this. He saw it all coming. It's all about greed, and greed is all about ego. So it's all about, I want to make sure I have enough for me and my family. And we really haven't gotten past that. And it's not our fault necessarily. We're hardwired for it. We're hardwired to live in a scarcity mentality, because we came up as hominids and as animals, and that's how they lived. And our brains were evolved for something very, very different than what we're living. So it makes all sense. He said a line which really has given me comfort and pause the last few years, but it really, really works. He used to say, when you're born, you get a ticket to the freak show.
Yeah.
When you're born in America, you get a front row seat. And that's all I've been thinking about for the last 2.5 years is this is the freak show on steroids. How much more do we need of this for us to wake up, to really look each other in the eye and say, you're a human and I'm a human, and we need to stop dividing ourselves into these teams and find out what we really, how we really connect. And the only way we're going to do that is by stop listening to the news, stop watching television, and getting off of social media and having conversations with each other again. And I don't know if that will happen or not. So, but it and every day it gets freakier. I mean, I tweeted, I don't know if you saw my tweet yesterday, but it was like, we didn't even get 24 hours after the midterm elections to just go, okay, there's a little more check and balance in government now. That's all I'm looking for. I mean, I can't control the freaks, all of them, but as long as there's some grown-ups somewhere and we've got some pushback, that's fine. 24 hours hadn't gone by already when, people are talking constitutional crisis. It's like, so the pace of it is just so exhausting. And I know, and some people say it's their plan. Here's what I know. Malignant narcissism is a very difficult thing to be around. People who have that personality, they take up every molecule of oxygen in every single room. When they're the president of the United States and they have that personality disorder, they are taking up so much oxygen in our lives and in the room, and forget the media. I mean, it's insane that it takes every bit of concentration and personal will to find enough time away from it to get some real perspective, to find your center, to do the work we're here to do as humans, reach out to those in need, take care of our own, work hard, share the spoils. I mean, it's all we can do. And
above. Every bit of it is important. And
it is, yeah.
Just like I was saying, with connecting, and having these kinds of conversations, we are creating that transition. It might not seem like it's very much, but if we do this every day and we do this as much as possible, whether it gets recorded and shared with others or not, whether it's just, on the street, in your home, at a party or a club or a restaurant, do it everywhere. And it's dawned on me that that's what we have to do. And there's also economic stuff, which I'm aware of, that I can be a part of, and helping to educate people about a different way to think about our system, because we have to even critique capitalism. People don't like it. I'm not apologizing for it. We need to. It's a problem. And there's reasons why, So I'd love to continue this conversation again. Let's do it sometime, maybe in person. And
that'd be great. I would love that.
Fantastic. Kelly, thank you so much. Tell us where people can learn more about your work.
So I have two big things going on right now. One of which is I'm over at Patreon. So if you go to patreon.com/Kelly Carlin, you can see some of my offerings there, one of which is my podcast. You get a little early version of my podcast, which I do about twice a month. But it's also where you can sign up for my Sunday Unplug, which is my mindfulness meditation, Sunday self-care. You get, almost every Sunday. I take off a couple of weeks here and there. There's also a women's creative thing. So that's my Patreon, which you can support my work and you can be a part of the stuff I'm putting out there in the world right now. And then also right now, I'm also having conversations with women. I'm enrolling a very exclusive program. It's called Women on the Verge, Go Deep to Take the Leap. And it's for women who are in transition, who want something deeper, wider, and more meaningful in the next phase of their life. And it's a year-long program. It's a small, exclusive cohort of women who go through the program with me. And it's profound work. It's life-changing work. It's kind of getting the 2.0 or the 3.0 version of yourself. It's and it touches all areas of your life. And if you go to womenonthevergecoaching.com, you can see that program and sign up to have an appointment with me to talk about the program and how it's a good fit and what you're looking for. So those are my two main areas right now that I'm working in, and my website's up there, but you can also follow me at Kelly_Carlin on Twitter, and Kelly Carlin is here on Instagram. I'm also on Facebook, but I have very mixed feelings about Facebook. So I try to bring people over to my Twitter and my Instagram, which I enjoy a lot more. I visit Facebook because I guess it's a necessity, but I'm not a big fan of their work right now.
Yeah, I hear you. I understand. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate taking the time out today. And let's do this again.
I would love to, Daniel. This was really, really great. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you so much. When I hear your dad talk about his Catholicism, I wasn't Catholic, it was Protestant, but there's similarities obviously, and you do those things, and you realize, wait a minute, when I interviewed John Fugelsang once, we connected immediately,
Love him.
And he said, you have to wonder when people take something seriously like a talking bush. But you talk about Jesus, love your neighbor as yourself. Well, that's just a metaphor. And it's funny, but it's also not, and it just, to me, I know that what you're talking about the combination of art and spirituality and reality. I have a song, Surfing with Jesus.
So we are connected to something bigger than us. It's just the thing that's bigger than our conscious ego. That's all it is. And
I love the way you put that.
And I remember when my dad, he went to rehab at age 68 because he was like, I'm binge drinking red wine and I'm taking Vicodin for my arthritis too much and I just need it. So he calls me like a weekend. He's like, look, we're going to AA meetings. And my dad said, I just don't know what to do with this higher power thing. And that's how I explained it to him. I said, look, Dad, it's Carl Jung sees it as this thing called the self with a capital S. It's bigger than your ego. That's all it has to be.